What, in your opinion, makes the greatest of all time in their sport? Is there a common denominator that you see cut across these men and women that make them the greatest?
They all have touched perfection from one moment to another, but they all want to hold it and grasp it. And it's like a jellyfish and it just slips through their fingers. But when they touch it, it's like being an addict. They want to touch it again and again and again because they know they can.
A national champion, an Olympic gymnast, an Emmy-nominated documentarian. Think about what it takes to achieve one of those things, let alone those three. I'm talking about Jennifer Say. You got really started in this at a young age, right?
Yeah, I was about 6 when I started, which is not unusual. It's a fun sport for little kids. And you have to remember, I was starting in the 70s. This was just a few years after Title IX had passed, which gave girls and young women kind of equal opportunity to play sports and do sports in college. There weren't a ton of options for girls in sports. I was sort of choosing between dance, cheerleading, and gymnastics. And Nadia Comaneci hit the stage and the world stage in 1976, and I was completely enamored.
Right.
As one was, because she was a kid. She was 14 years old, and we all related to her. And I was doing sort of rec classes at the time, but then I just became completely obsessed with gymnastics. But we didn't have other choices. There weren't soccer teams and all this other stuff that my daughter can play anything my son plays. Those opportunities weren't really there in 1976.
Yeah. When did you know that it was more than a sport, a hobby, an interest, that it was a real life passion for you?
It sounds crazy to say it, but I was probably 7. I mean, I loved it so much. And the thing about gymnastics, which is becoming less true, which I'm grateful for, is it was always viewed as a sort of young, or at least as when I did a young girl sport, a child sport. And so you had this very narrow window of opportunity. It was sort of viewed that you couldn't really do it past 16 or 17. And so the intensity started very young. And so by 7, I was going 4 days a week for 2 or 3 hours at a time at 7 years old, which seems kind of insane. And I started competing at 7, and I made elite, which is the highest level that you compete for a spot on the national team, by the time I was 10.
Wow. I've known some gymnasts that have done that sort of thing, and I watched what it did to them and to their families, making sacrifices, actually moving to get them to coaches and all of that. It affects a lot. It affects everybody in the family.
It absolutely does. And I think, I had some challenges with my family as I left the sport for a long time. But as I look back now and as a parent myself, I think I was a very difficult child to parent. I was very driven. I wanted to go to the next level. I wanted to go to the next club, and I wanted to, it wasn't enough to make the national team. I wanted to be in the top 6. Like, I don't know what you do with a kid like this. And my parents did absolutely everything they could to support me. Now, one could argue they went too far because the entire family then sort of revolved around me doing this sport. And when it became a bad situation for me and I was very physically damaged and emotionally just falling apart, and I wanted to leave, that was just unthinkable at that point for my family because they'd sacrificed so much.
They put so much into it, and it's like, now you want to quit? Are you kidding me? Dr. Corey Yeager is an NBA psychotherapist and author of a great book called How Am I Doing? 40 Conversations to Have with Yourself. I've read it cover to cover, and I'm going to talk about not all 40 of these conversations because I want you to buy the book and read it. You don't just need to read it, you need to use it, but we're going to talk about that today. How did you get on this path, doing the things that you're doing? What got you interested in helping people actualize themselves and be all of who they can be?
So my grandmother, when I was a young kid, at about age, I think I was about 10 years old, she pulled me to the side and said, "Son, you have a gift. And the reason I'm telling you that I see this gift in you is because I have it. And it's called discernment." I didn't really know what my grandmother was talking about, but I had watched her be a person that people came to continuously, engaged with, asked questions. And she moved with such a wisdom, Dr. Phil, that I was intrigued. I don't think I understood why I was intrigued, but I was. So I think I early on had a sense that engaging with others, supporting others was and would be important to me. And then I found a way to couple that intrigue with academic pursuit. I had played football at Long Beach State out here in LA, but didn't get my degree while I was going to school. I thought I was going to be a pro offensive lineman and make millions of dollars. That didn't happen, and then I didn't have my degree. So found my way back into the academic endeavors. My wife pushed me. She kept saying to me, honey, you have to get your degree so the boys know that we both have our degree. I was working at Ford Motor Company on the line, working, busting my butt. So started going back to school at night and fell in love relatively quickly with the psychological realm. It was really interesting to me. And as I pursued that and got that BA, I thought maybe I should do therapy. I didn't really know what it entailed, but it was the best choice in my life. My wife pushed me to do that. And she's been a cornerstone to a lot of the things that I pursued over the course of my life.
Well, you're working with pro athletes now, with the Detroit Pistons, and I wrote a op-ed piece not too long ago for Sportico. It had to do with the NFL draft. I said the NFL's just getting ready to mint a new class of millionaires, and I wanted to talk about what they're not telling them. What they're not telling them is that they're going to have, on average, just a little over 3 years of a career.
Yeah.
And that 80% of them, 2 years after being out of the league, are going to be in financial distress and or bankrupt. But they don't tell them that, but yet that's what happens. I'm really interested in your take about this because you and I both played Division I football. And even at that level, we know how disciplined you have to be, how committed you have to be, how dedicated you have to be. Now take it to the next level, the professional level, which is what, 2-3% of those that play college football make it at that level. So we're talking about intelligent, dedicated, disciplined young men, but yet within 5 years, they're going to be in life and financial distress, depressed and out of control. How's that happening?
You know, I think there are so many factors, Dr. Phil, that go into what you just said. And one of the leading factors is all of a sudden, I'll just briefly tell a quick story. I had a kid that got drafted. And he got drafted, and we were sitting and talking after the draft. And he said, Doc, before the draft, I looked at my bank account. I couldn't even take a $20 bill out. I had $12 in my bank account. I get drafted, I sign, $12 million in my bank account. But no one had discussed with him what that movement looked like and how that would play out and how you had to be financially astute and understanding that all of these people will be coming to you and you can spend it frivolously and lose it, or you can figure out a different way. There's no one really, Doc, having those deep conversations with them, maybe at a surface level. At the rookie symposium, they may talk a little bit about it. But oftentimes these young men are coming from financial situations where it was a struggle. And then all of a sudden I have all of this and I don't know what to do with it. And everyone wants a piece of it. So I think that balancing act is extremely difficult. And all the while that you're balancing that and trying to figure it out, you must perform. You said 2 to 3 years, 4-year career is almost a long career in the NFL or the NBA these days. So no one is having these extremely important conversations. And the kids look back after 4 or 5 years and they've lost it all.
Dr. Annie Shadle is herself a 2-time NCAA national track and field champion, winning in the 1,500 meters outdoors and the mile indoors. Now she has a PhD in health education and promotion. Her research focused on understanding the psycho-emotional and psychosocial challenges, preparation, and responses of Olympic gold medal winning athletes, and she holds a BS in exercise science. Tell people what it is you do, what it is you focus on, because this isn't mental health, this is mental performance.
Yeah, so I think just for my own athletic journey, so we follow our passions in life. So a little bit about my story was just really liking understanding how we push our bodies, how we push those limits, understanding from the physiological standpoint. So my exercise science degree, really wanting to understand that. And through that journey, I discovered just how powerful that mind is. And I saw myself drawn to and wanting to know more about those that were successful, right? And how did they do what they did, and how did they continually stand at the top of the podium, right? Win the national championships, win whatever championship you're after. And so through that, I discovered more of the psychology aspects and just how powerful our mind is, and just how much our mind just shapes everything that we do. So that led me kind of back to really understanding what that performance mindset is, and what the best of the best do, the environments that create these winning teams, these winning organizations, and that's kind of where I live and breathe and love to do that kind of work.
So let's talk about pressure. What is your approach to helping people perform at that critical moment when it's their opportunity to choke or their opportunity to really step up and excel? Do you have a particular strategy, approach, philosophy about teaching athletes to deal with those big pressure moments?
I worked with a coach once that said, pressure doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist, right? So in their mind, that's how they dealt with it, was just saying like, it doesn't matter, right? And then you hear the cliches of like, well, pressure builds diamonds, and there's all of these things with dealing with pressure. But I think in general, ideally, we've prepared our athletes for this moment, right? So the best athletes of the best athletes just live for those pressure moments, right? And this is when we see in the movies where like things get like foggy and kind of zoom out, and you just see this like tunnel vision, right? And the best athletes like live for those moments and know exactly what to do. But even with that, they've probably had these moments as they've gone through sport to know how to handle those moments, right? So if we think about your progression and your development as an athlete, probably early on, there were coaches that helped them have those moments, so that now when there are these big moments in the Super Bowl or whatever it is, they know how to manage those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, are you saying acknowledge it and have a strategy for it when it comes up?
Well, I would say the best of the best, like live for those moments. But I would say too, in those moments, right? So you take control of what happens, right? So you know exactly what you're doing, you know exactly the play, you know exactly how you're going to, what you need to do, and you stay focused on the moment, right? So you don't get overwhelmed by the moment, but you're able to like recognize where your mind is, you're able to put it where it needs to be, and like block out any distractions that might be there, right? So whatever that is, the winning free throw of a basketball game, right? So you know exactly, like, stay with your routine, take your deep breath, do your shot, right? So really being able to control your mind to stay focused on the task at hand to deliver your best performance in that moment.
Dr. Daniel Amen has helped millions of people change their brains, and as a product, change their lives through Amen clinics, his best-selling books, and public television programs. Head trauma is not just major trauma of like going through a windshield or falling 10 feet onto a concrete floor. It can be small repetitive traumas like, kids heading soccer balls just over and over. You do that 100 times a week, and these things can accumulate, and it can be any number of things. And if we think back at the times in our lives where, we fell on the ice and hit our head, or, we slipped and fell back and banged our head just as we hit the ground, these things have an effect. And if you check them and see that there was an impact, this can be helped. It can be changed. The truth is, if somebody does come in and find out, oh, wow, yeah, my brain is not well, that's not a static situation, because in many or most situations, the brain can get better. The brain can heal. The brain can improve by taking proper steps, correct?
By putting the brain in a healing environment. So I did the big NFL study. I don't know if we've ever talked about this.
I don't think so.
When the NFL was having trouble with the truth about traumatic brain injury in football, I got to see Anthony Davis, the Hall of Fame running back from USC. He's called the Notre Dame killer because in 1972, he scored 6 touchdowns against the University of Notre Dame. But he was having trouble with his memory, with his temper, and then he had periods of confusion. And when I scanned him at 54, his brain clearly was a traumatic brain injury, and it looked like he was 85. But 5 months later, his brain looked remarkably better. And then he and I went to the Retired Players Association and gave a presentation. And subsequently, I've scanned and treated 300 NFL players, high levels of damage. Stop lying about it. Playing football is a brain damaging sport. Brain is soft, skull is hard, skull has sharp bony ridges. You cannot have those level of intense over and over impact without damaging the brain. But the exciting part of my work with the NFL players, 80% of them get better when I put them on a rehabilitation program, which is so simple. We basically teach them about brain health, multiple vitamin with high doses of B6, B12, and folate, because that helps boost brain function, high dose fish oil, and then a brain boost that works in 6 different ways. And I published that study. The exciting news that still very few people know is even if you have been bad to your brain, you can make it better, and I can prove it. And that's what I get so excited. You remember we did the show with Gary Busey. I love Gary. And not only did he play football, where he tried to break people's sternums, the big breastbone.
Right.
But he had substance abuse problem, and they had a bad motorcycle accident. And then he had a tumor in his sinus that they radiated. So his brain was terrible. But by doing the right things, he's now got a show on Netflix and, he's able to work.
They say integrity is what you do when nobody's watching. And that's what he did when nobody was watching. Everybody had gone home. That's for damn sure.
I just never forget that line written by Bud Greenspan. His brother was a great narrator, a man named David Perry. A voice calls from within to go on. So he goes on. Then the last line in it is, all honor to John Stephen Akhwari of Tanzania. Well, that's what these guys do. They honor themselves, they honor their families, they honor the sport, they honor their countries, and they honor humanity when they do this stuff.
Absolutely. That's something we should all aspire to. You wrote a book about talking to goats, and in all humility and candor, you definitely will be in someone else's book about goats, because when it comes to doing what you do as a broadcaster, you are definitely the greatest of all time at what you do. So what drives Jim Gray? What keeps you going after all this?
This life that I've been able to lead and all of the people that I've been able to meet, it's been so fantastic. It's just been great. And I love meeting the people, and I love listening to their stories. And I want to, hear how they did it, why they did it, and, try and see if what I can do in these interviews can help somebody else and help future generations so that we can have more goats. And so I'm driven to hear other people's stories, to learn from them. And I want to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday. I can still improve. I've done tens of thousands of interviews. I've done 1 or 2 of them right. Otherwise, I've stumbled, or I forgot about something, or I didn't follow up right, or how many times do you walk away from a show, Dr. Phil, and you watch it and you say, boy, I should have asked this, or why did I stumble on that question? I'm still trying to get it right.
Every single show.
Exactly.
Every single show.